The stars burned cold and silent beyond the viewing glass. Captain Ryland Hayes sat alone inside the briefing room, staring at the holographic map that floated before him. The crimson nebula glowed like a living wound in the darkness of space, swirling, breathing, waiting. No ship had ever returned from its core. No signal had ever escaped its grasp. Yet somewhere inside that chaos, a royal vessel of the Varellan Empire had gone missing, carrying two alien princesses, Lyra and Ceres. The galaxy whispered their names like a prayer and like a curse. The Galactic Council's envoy spoke without emotion. Captain Hayes, you are the only pilot who has flown through gravitational storms this dense and lived. Ryland didn't answer. He just looked at the nebula's red storm pulsing on the display. He knew this wasn't a mission of honor. It was a suicide command. But behind his eyes, there was a quiet fire, the kind that comes from old guilt and unspoken promises. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. What's the objective? Locate the royal ship, retrieve the princesses, and exit alive, the envoy said. Ryland almost smiled at the last word, alive. He signed the mission order without another question. Because for him, it wasn't about living. It was about proving that humanity still mattered in a galaxy that thought humans were weak. Outside the docking bay, his ship waited. The Valkyrie, an aging rescue craft upgraded with human ingenuity and stubbornness. Other alien pilots watched from a distance, whispering, "He's human. He won't last 10 minutes in the Crimson Nebula." But Ryland didn't care. He walked like a man who had already made peace with death. Before launch, he ran his hand along the hull of his ship, feeling the scars and patch marks left from old battles. "This time, girl," he murmured softly, "we fly into hell." Engines ignited, light shimmered, and the Valkyrie roared into the void, cutting through the dark like a silver blade. As the ship approached the nebula, the stars began to fade, replaced by crimson clouds of gas that twisted and pulsed like veins under a cosmic skin. Static filled his comms, then silence. The onboard AI flickered. Warning, sensors failing, gravitational field unstable. Ryland switched the AI off. "Don't need fear talking to me," he muttered, gripping the manual controls. The moment the Valkyrie crossed the nebula's outer layer, space itself changed. Lights bent, sound disappeared, even time felt slower. Colors bled across the windshield, blue, gold, red, like living fire. Inside that storm, every instinct told Ryland to turn back. But somewhere deep in the interference, a faint distress signal blinked. Weak, broken, desperate. He focused on it like a heartbeat. "Royal Ship Varela 1, the message repeated. "Oxygen low, systems failing, please." Then static swallowed the rest. Ryland's breath caught. "They're alive," he whispered. He adjusted his thrusters manually, weaving through gravitational whirlpools and plasma waves that could shred steel. Each movement demanded perfect precision. One wrong shift, and he'd be scattered into atoms. Sweat rolled down his forehead, his heart beating in rhythm with the storm. Outside, shapes moved in the mist, ghostly outlines of ships lost long ago. Some looked human, others alien, all drifting silently. Ryland felt a strange presence, as if something inside the nebula was aware of him. He ignored it, focusing on the signal. But when he glanced at the reflection in the cockpit glass, he swore he saw eyes staring back, bright, glowing, watching. Hours passed like seconds, or maybe seconds like hours. The nebula didn't follow the laws of normal space. Time twisted, light folded, and Ryland began hearing whispers through the static. "Turn back, human," a voice said, soft as a dream. He tightened his grip on the controls. "Not today," he said, his voice steady. Because humans didn't stop when told to stop. Humans pushed through, even when everything screamed no. Finally, through the haze, a flicker appeared, a faint blue light, rotating slowly. He zoomed in, and there it was, the royal starship Varela 1, trapped between plasma storms and magnetic fields, its hull torn, engines dead. Ryland's heart surged with adrenaline. He powered up the Valkyrie's shield generators, diving closer through the electric storm. Every alarm screamed, every panel blinked red. But he didn't care, he was close. The closer he got, the more the nebula seemed to resist him, as if alive. Tendrils of glowing dust reached toward his ship, dragging, twisting, trying to pull him apart. He slammed full power into the thrusters, breaking free with a burst of white light. When he finally reached the ship, the sight froze him. The royal insignia still burned faintly, and through the cracked viewport, he saw two figures inside, unmoving. He whispered to himself, "Hold on, I'm coming." His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of purpose. Because deep down, Rylan wasn't flying for medals or orders. He was flying for redemption. For every mission he failed, every life he couldn't save before, this time he wouldn't fail. As the Valkyrie latched onto the royal vessel, the nebula pulsed violently, as if angry. Lightning arcs danced across the hull, shadows moved in the mist, and the whispers grew louder. "You don't belong here, human," the voice said again. He closed his eyes for a second, steadying his breath. "Then I'll make my own place," he replied, as the airlock door hissed open. And with that, the human pilot stepped into the burning red storm, unaware that the fate of two alien princesses, and perhaps the galaxy itself, now rested on his human heart. The airlock sealed behind Captain Rylan Hayes with a hollow echo. His boots touched the metal floor of the royal ship, and for the first time since entering the nebula, the silence felt alive. Dust floated like red mist, flickering with static energy. Each breath carried the taste of metal and ozone, thick and heavy. The ship's lights flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows down the corridor. Rylan lifted his wrist lamp, sweeping it across the walls marked by claw-like burns. "This isn't from plasma," he muttered softly. "Something touched this ship." The corridors were twisted, panels torn open, wires hanging like vines. He moved cautiously, his pulse syncing with the faint hum of the dying ship. In the distance, a soft sound echoed, not mechanical, but human, or almost human. A whisper, a cry he couldn't tell. He followed it deeper into the wreck, every step echoing through the emptiness. The nebula's crimson light seeped through the shattered windows, painting everything with a bleeding glow. It felt like the ship itself was trapped between two realities, half alive, half memory. Then, through the smoke, he saw movement. Two figures huddled beside a collapsed console, wrapped in shimmering silver cloaks. Rylan lowered his weapon, approaching slowly. "Don't move," he said softly. "I'm here to help." One of the figures lifted her head, her eyes glowing faint blue, skin like polished pearl. She looked at him not with fear, but with disbelief. "You're human," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded. "Captain Rylan Hayes, rescue pilot, Galactic Council sent me." The other figure stirred, younger, fiercer, with deep violet eyes. Her tone cut sharp as a blade. "Council sent a human? We are already dead then." Rylan didn't flinch, he had heard worse. He knelt beside them, scanning their vitals. "You're alive. That's what matters. The ship is stable for now, but we need to move." The older one, Lyra, nodded slowly, her calm voice breaking the tension. "My sister speaks with fire. Captain, forgive her, we thought no one would come." "Humans don't turn away," Rylan said quietly. The younger sister, Saris, frowned but didn't reply. Her pride was wrapped in fear, and her fear was wrapped in love for her sister. Together, they looked fragile and divine. But their surroundings were anything but. The ship groaned suddenly, a deep metallic moan that vibrated through the walls. Outside, lightning burst through the nebula's clouds, sending waves of red light crawling along the floor. Lyra's hand trembled. "It's waking again," she said. Rylan looked at her sharply. "What's waking?" "The nebula," she whispered. "It's not a storm, Captain, it's alive." Before he could answer, the walls shuddered violently. Lights flickered out, replaced by pulsing veins of crimson energy crawling through the metal. The floor cracked, sending sparks dancing through the air. Saris screamed as part of the ceiling caved in near them. Rylan threw himself forward, pulling both sisters clear. He felt the heat scorch his suit, but he didn't stop. "Move now," he shouted, his voice echoing against the chaos. They ran through the flickering corridor toward the docking point. The nebula's storm pressed against the ship like a living hand, twisting steel, bending gravity. For a brief second, Rylan saw something move through the red haze outside. A colossal shape, shifting like smoke and light. It had eyes, enormous and ancient, watching them with hunger. Then it was gone, swallowed by the storm. "Captain," Lyra gasped. It's feeding on the ship's power. It's drawing life from us. He turned sharply. Then we cut its meal short. He sprinted to the control deck, slamming his hands on the manual override. Sparks flew as he reconnected circuits, forcing emergency thrusters back online. AI offline, communication disabled, the console warned. Rylan gritted his teeth. Then we do it the human way. He rerouted power from the oxygen reserve into the engine's ignition coils. A reckless move, but sometimes courage was just another word for desperation. Lyra grabbed his arm. You'll burn yourself alive. He smiled faintly. That's better than fading quietly. The engines roared, their blue glow tearing through the crimson fog. The ship lurched forward, breaking from the nebula's grip for a moment. Outside, the storm screamed, a sound that wasn't sound, but a vibration through the soul. Sarah stared out the window, her voice shaking. It's following us. Indeed, the crimson storm seemed to chase, its tendrils reaching like smoke alive with anger. Hold on, Rylan shouted. He slammed the manual controls again, forcing the ship through a tunnel of plasma light. The nebula pulsed harder, warping space around them. Time bent. Seconds became stretched threads of eternity. Lyra closed her eyes, whispering something in her native tongue. A prayer, maybe, or a farewell. Rylan's fingers danced over the controls, guided by instinct rather than calculation. He didn't see equations. He saw rhythm, flow, pattern, pulse. Human intuition where machines failed. Finally, with a violent jolt, the ship broke through the storm's inner field. A calm center, glowing faintly gold, surrounded by swirling death. They floated in the eye of the nebula, silent, breathless, alive. Rylan exhaled slowly, the sweat on his forehead glistening. We're safe, he said quietly, though his voice carried doubt. Lyra looked at him with wonder. No machine, no AI, no alien mind has ever done what you just did, she whispered. Saris looked at him too, her expression softer now. Maybe humans aren't as fragile as they say, she murmured. Outside, lightning coiled around the golden void, like a living crown of fire. But deep in that light, something still watched, unseen, waiting. And though they didn't yet know it, their rescue had only awakened what the nebula truly was. Something ancient, something that remembered the human heart. The calm center of the nebula felt like another world. Golden light shimmered around the damaged royal ship, floating inside a silent storm that waited and watched. Captain Rylan Hayes stood near the cracked viewport, staring at the glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Behind him, the two alien princesses tried to stabilize the failing systems, their hands moving over panels that sparked with fading power. Princess Lyra Varellin, the elder, moved with gentle precision, her silver hair flowing like liquid light. Her voice was calm even in chaos, every word soft yet strong. Power cells are drained, atmosphere stable for 2 hours at most, she said quietly. Her sister Saris looked younger, her energy wild, eyes glowing violet with restless fire. She struck the panel with frustration. We're trapped in this grave, and the storm knows we're here. Rylan turned toward them, his tone firm but kind. We'll get out. Humans don't give up that easily. Saris folded her arms, her voice edged with disbelief. Humans are reckless, not invincible. Rylan smiled faintly. Sometimes that's enough. The princesses exchanged a look, a silent conversation that needed no words. Lyra stepped forward. You risked your life flying through that storm. Why? Rylan looked at the swirling light outside. His reflection ghosted across the glass. Because no one else would, he said, and someone had to try. For a moment, the air between them felt warmer, as if the nebula itself paused to listen. Then a deep hum rolled through the deck, low and rhythmic, like a pulse under their feet. The lights dimmed, flickered, then glowed red again. Lyra froze. It's sensing us, she whispered. Rylan frowned. You said it's alive. What does that mean? Saris walked closer, her eyes narrowing. The nebula isn't gas, Captain. It's consciousness. It feeds on emotion, fear, despair. Her words sent a chill through the air. It lured us here because of the artifact we carry. Rylan's gaze sharpened. Artifact? Lyra hesitated. But before she could answer, the hull vibrated violently, a sound like thunder swallowed by liquid. Outside, the golden light turned crimson, swirling faster. Rylan ran to the control station, pressing his hand to the console. "It's pulling us back into the storm," Sarah shouted. "It knows we're alive." Metal screamed as invisible pressure crushed the ship from all sides. Sparks rained from the ceiling, systems failed one by one. Lyra fell. Rylan caught her by the arm, pulling her close as gravity tilted sideways. "Hold on," he yelled, gripping a railing. Through the window, a shape formed. A vast face made of light and dust, eyes bright as dying suns. It spoke without words, its voice vibrating in their bones. "Why do you enter my silence, human?" Rylan stared into the storm, refusing to look away. "Because they needed help," he said slowly. "And because I could." The face shifted, its expression unreadable. "Your kind burns quickly and forgets the fire." It whispered, "Leave before I remember you." The ship shook again, harder, alarm screamed. Rylan turned to the sisters. "We need to move now." He sprinted down the corridor toward the docking bay, guiding them through debris and flickering lights. Sarah struggled to keep up, clutching a small metallic orb that glowed faint blue. Rylan noticed it, but said nothing yet, his focus locked on survival. When they reached the bay, the Valkyrie waited, its hull scorched, its engines humming weakly. Rylan sealed the hatch behind them, collapsing into the pilot's seat. "Buckle in. This ride's going to hurt," he said with a grin that didn't hide his exhaustion. The engines roared, the Nebula roared louder. As the Valkyrie detached from the royal ship, the crimson tendrils followed like living fire. Rylan pushed the throttle to maximum, steering through energy waves that bent reality itself. The sisters watched silently, their eyes wide. "Is he guessing?" Saris muttered. Lyra smiled faintly. "No, he's feeling. Humans fly with instinct, not with code." Outside, plasma lightning exploded in spirals of blue and red. Rylan moved with every flash, turning chaos into rhythm. The ship danced between storms like a heartbeat refusing to die. Then a sudden blast hit the side, an invisible force tearing across the hull. Warning lights screamed, oxygen dropped, control systems blinked out. The Nebula's voice echoed again. "You cannot leave what belongs to me." Rylan slammed a manual lever. The emergency core ejector engaged. A blinding flash erupted behind the ship, throwing them forward through the final barrier of energy. Silence followed, endless, soft, weightless. The storm was gone, replaced by a sea of quiet stars. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Saris exhaled, half laughing, half crying. "We're alive." Rylan leaned back, closing his eyes for a heartbeat. "Told you humans don't quit." Lyra looked at him with something new in her gaze, not just gratitude, but recognition. "You saved royal blood of Varela, Captain, and the Empire owes you a life debt." Rylan opened his eyes slowly. "I didn't do it for debt," he said. "I did it because it was right." Saris studied him quietly, the blue orb glowing faintly in her hands. Inside that light, something ancient stirred, a symbol, pulsing like a heartbeat. Rylan noticed it, curiosity flickering across his face. "What is that?" he asked. Lyra hesitated before answering, her voice low and distant. "It's called the Heart of Valair, Captain, and it's why the Nebula will never stop hunting us." Outside, in the blackness between stars, the crimson nebula twisted once more, alive and angry. Far away, unseen eyes opened again within its storm, whispering the human's name like a promise. "Rylan Hayes," the voice said through the dark. "You've taken what belongs to me." And in that moment, he realized the rescue was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a war between light, darkness, and the unbreakable will of a human heart. The stars outside the Valkyrie flickered like dying candles. Behind them, the crimson nebula stretched like a storm that refused to sleep, its colors bleeding across the horizon of space. Captain Rylan Hayes stared at it through the cracked viewport, his reflection overlapping the red light like a ghost between worlds. He had escaped death before, but this time, something inside the nebula had followed. It wasn't over, not yet. Lyra worked silently beside him, her calm face lit by the faint glow of navigation screens. Saris stood behind them, still clutching the heart of Valair, its surface pulsing with blue light that seemed to beat in rhythm with her own heart. No one spoke for a long moment. Even the hum of the engines sounded afraid. Then Rylan broke the silence. We're clear, but that thing isn't done with us. Lyra nodded slowly. The Nebula is aware, it doesn't forget. Saris frowned. It shouldn't be possible for energy to think. Rylan glanced at her. And yet here we are, still breathing after flying through a living storm. The younger princess turned away, frustration in her eyes. You don't understand, Captain. The heart we carry isn't just ancient, it's sacred. Lyra added softly. The heart of Velair was forged when our ancestors touched the soul of a dying star. It carries memory, power, and consciousness. Rylan leaned back, his voice low. And that storm wants it back. Yes, Lyra whispered. Because the nebula was born from the same star. A chill ran through the air. The realization hit like gravity. The thing they fled wasn't chasing them for revenge. It was chasing them to reclaim a part of itself. Saris slammed her hand against the panel. Then we can't keep running. It will find us again. Rylan's voice hardened. Then we stop running. He began recalibrating the ship's sensors. Every command he entered flickered across the damaged console, sparks jumping with each press. What are you doing? Lyra asked. Rylan's eyes stayed fixed on the data stream. I'm going back in. Saris's voice rose, angry. You're insane. He turned his head, calm and steady. Maybe. But humans don't leave unfinished fights. The heart of Velair glowed brighter, sensing his intent. The nebula pulsed in the distance, responding like it had heard him. Rylan felt it in his bones, space itself vibrating, whispering, remembering. Lyra touched his shoulder gently. Captain, this isn't just about courage anymore. It's about something older than both our species. He looked at her with quiet conviction. That's why we have to understand it, not fear it. The ship trembled, lights flickering, the stars outside warping into a whirlpool of color. The nebula was moving, expanding, reaching. The crew could see tendrils of energy stretching across space like veins of living fire. Saris clutched the heart tighter, her voice a whisper. It's calling me. Lyra grabbed her sister's hand. Fight it, Saris. But the younger princess's eyes glowed faint blue, tears forming as she whispered. It's not just calling, it's remembering me. Rylan moved closer, his voice deep and steady. Look at me. Princess, stay here, stay now. She blinked, shaking, the glow fading slightly. Lyra's voice broke. The heart connects to those of royal blood. It uses emotion to speak. Rylan thought for a moment, then said, Then maybe we use that connection against it. They watched as the nebula shifted in shape again. A giant silhouette formed within its light, something immense and beautiful and terrible. It had no clear form, just flowing energy that resembled wings, faces, and flame. It wasn't a monster, it was a god of forgotten creation. And now, it wanted back what was stolen. Rylan took manual control of the ship, aiming toward the storm. Lyra gasped, You can't face it head on. His voice was calm, but filled with steel. Sometimes you have to fly into the fire to understand what burns. The nebula opened before them like an eye awakening, light flooding space. The heart of Velair pulsed faster, the rhythm matching the storm. Saris gritted her teeth, whispering, It's talking. Rylan's voice was quiet. What's it saying? She shuddered. It's saying come home. The ship entered the outer layer again, the red storm consuming everything. Gravity twisted, alarms blared, yet Rylan's hands never left the controls. He flew through pure chaos guided by nothing but instinct. The nebula's voice grew louder, echoing through every metal bone of the Valkyrie. Human heart, you shine where you shouldn't. You carry fire where only silence belongs. Rylan answered without fear. Then you'll have to take it from me. The storm's tendrils lashed against the hull, lightning bursting in waves of violet and gold. Inside, the heart of Velair rose from Saris's hands, floating midair, glowing like a newborn sun. Lyra shielded her eyes. It's waking fully. Rylan turned sharply. Then let it see what humans are made of. The heart released a pulse of energy, merging its light with the nebula's storm. For a brief instant, everything went silent. Rylan, Lyra, and Saris stood in a void of gold and red. No ship, no sound, only presence. A whisper filled the space. Neither male nor female, both ancient and endless. You would fight your maker, human, it said softly. Rylan looked into the endless glow, his voice steady. "No," he said, "but I'll protect what your creation forgot. Choice." The nebula's form rippled violently, its light flashing brighter. The ship reappeared, flung backward through waves of plasma and light. Rylan pulled up on the controls, holding the ship together by sheer will. As they broke free again, the nebula dimmed, its edges fading like a wounded beast retreating into the dark. For now, it was silent, but not defeated. Rylan's breathing was heavy, his hands trembling. Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "You challenged a god, Captain." He smiled weakly. "No, Princess, I just reminded one that humans still exist." Outside, the nebula glowed faintly, like an ember refusing to die. And in its quiet core, a voice whispered again, softer this time, almost curious. "Human fire burns beautifully." The nebula faded behind them, silent for the first time since the rescue began. But silence in space never meant peace. Inside the Valkyrie, the air felt heavy, filled with unspoken fear and the hum of exhausted engines. Captain Rylan Hayes sat at the control desk, eyes fixed on the trembling stars ahead. He could feel it, the calm before something worse. Lyra Varellin moved quietly around the cabin, checking systems. Her movements were graceful but weary, her silver hair dim under the pale cabin lights. Saris sat near the rear console, the heart of Velair floating above her palms like a living ember. Its glow had dimmed, yet it pulsed in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Rylan glanced toward it, his voice low. "That thing hasn't stopped since we left." Saris looked up sharply. "It's not a thing, Captain, it's alive." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I figured that much." Lyra turned, her tone soft but serious. "The heart is stabilizing, for now, but it's bound to Saris. It won't release her easily." Rylan leaned back in his chair, sighing. "I've seen tech merge with minds before, but this feels like it's watching us." The ship creaked in response, as though agreeing. Outside the viewport, faint threads of red light trailed them like ghost fire. The nebula might have retreated, but part of it had followed, invisible and patient. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. Rylan programmed the course for the nearest Allied station, but halfway through, the navigation screen flickered. Coordinates shifted, then vanished. "System error," the console reported. He frowned, tapping commands. "No, this isn't error. This is interference." Saris rose from her seat, her eyes glowing faint blue again. The heart brightened, spinning faster. Lyra's voice trembled. "Saris, what are you doing?" Saris shook her head. "I'm not. It's showing me something." The lights dimmed across the ship, replaced by a holographic projection of stars and burning ruins. A voice echoed softly, the same voice that had spoken within the nebula. "Return what was taken, and you will be spared." Rylan stood quickly. "It's inside our systems again." Saris's face paled. "It's not inside. It's through me." Without warning, the heart of Velair released a shockwave of blue light. The ship jolted, alarms screamed, oxygen levels dropped. Rylan grabbed the manual override, shouting, "Stabilize the core now." Lyra tried rerouting power, sparks flying from the console. But Saris just stood there, her body rigid, her voice hollow. "It's showing me the truth, Captain," she whispered. "The heart isn't a weapon, it's a memory." Rylan froze. A memory of what? Saris's eyes turned white, her voice layered with another tone, deeper, older, of a world that once lived inside the nebula, of gods that fell into silence, of life turned into light. Lyra reached for her sister, tears forming. "Saris, stop. It's taking over you." But Saris stepped back, clutching the heart tightly, her body trembling. "You don't understand," she cried. "The heart belongs to it. And I took it." Rylan's jaw tightened. "You what?" Lyra's expression broke into shock and pain. "She stole it. Captain, she didn't tell me. She told me it was a gift from our ancestors, but it wasn't." Saris shook her head violently. "It wasn't theft, it was salvation." Her voice cracked. "The Council wanted to destroy it. They feared its power. But I knew the nebula wasn't evil, only incomplete." Rylan's fists clenched. Incomplete or not, it nearly killed us all. The sisters faced each other, one trembling with guilt, the other with disbelief. Lyra's voice was sharp. "You lied to me, to everyone, to him. Saris turned toward Rylan, tears streaming down her face. I thought I could control it. I thought I could prove that humans and Varellans could both touch the stars without fear. Rylan's eyes softened for a second, but his tone stayed steady. You didn't just touch the stars, princess. You woke something ancient that thinks we belong to it. The ship rocked violently, lights flickering red. The nebula had found them again, emerging like a shadow of living fire. Lyra stumbled, shouting, "It's here." Rylan jumped back into the pilot's seat, activating the engines. Not for long. Outside, tendrils of plasma whipped through the void, wrapping around the ship like chains. The nebula's voice filled the cabin once more, colder now. "Human, return what the child of stars has stolen." Saris screamed as the heart blazed white-hot in her hands, energy flooding through her veins. Rylan reached toward her. "Saris, let it go." But she couldn't. It was part of her now. Lyra held her sister close, shouting through the storm. "Please, listen to him. You'll die." Saris looked up, eyes glowing like twin stars. "Maybe that's the price," she whispered. "Maybe that's what the prophecy meant." Rylan stared at her, the words chilling him. "What prophecy?" Lyra answered through tears. "The one that said a human's fire will reignite the stars, but only if royalty burns first." Rylan's chest tightened, the meaning sinking in. He whispered, "No, not while I'm here." He slammed a switch, diverting all ship power to the containment field. Electric arcs spread across the cockpit, the hull shuddering as the heart's energy exploded outward. Light flooded everything, blue, white, gold, merging the ship, the sisters, and the nebula into one blinding wave. In that instant, Rylan saw memories not his own, civilizations of light, worlds without flesh, stars that sang, then died. And beneath it all, one constant pulse, the human heart refusing to break. When the light finally faded, Saris lay unconscious, the heart dim once more. Lyra knelt beside her, sobbing softly. Rylan stood there, breathing hard, his voice low. "You still think humans can't survive gods?" Outside, the nebula drifted quietly, retreating for now. But its voice echoed faintly across the stars. "This is not the end, human fire." And Rylan whispered back, his eyes cold and resolute. "It never is." The stars outside were fading again, swallowed by a slow-moving wave of crimson haze. The nebula had not given up its hunt. It was returning, stronger, alive, and angry. Inside the Valkyrie, alarms blared softly, their rhythm like a dying heartbeat. Captain Rylan Hayes stood at the center of the bridge, his hands stained with burns, his uniform torn, his face calm. Princess Lyra knelt beside her sister Saris, who still lay unconscious. The heart of Valair pulsed faintly near her chest, glowing like an ember that refused to die. Lyra whispered, "She's fading, Captain. The heart is feeding on her life." Rylan's eyes darkened. "Then I'll cut its meal short." He stepped toward the control console, rerouting power manually, sparks lighting his face. Outside, the crimson storm twisted closer, its tendrils stretching like burning roots through space. The voice returned, soft and ancient. "Human, you are brave, but you are small." Rylan smirked faintly. "Small things start big fires." Lyra looked up, fear in her silver eyes. "Captain, you can't fight it alone. No one can." Rylan's tone was steady. "Maybe not alone, but I've never needed permission to try." He pressed a sequence on the terminal, revealing a manual override lever sealed beneath the glass. Lyra gasped. "That's the reactor bypass. You'll overload the core." He nodded. "Exactly. If I can push the reactor past limit, I can create a surge powerful enough to collapse the nebula's field. It'll tear it apart from the inside." Her voice trembled. "It'll tear you apart too." Rylan smiled softly. "That's the idea." Lyra's breath caught. "No, there must be another way." He looked at her, his voice quieter now. "There always is, but not always in time." He knelt beside Saris, brushing a strand of silver hair from her forehead. "You tried to save your people," he said softly. "Now let me do the same." The deck shook violently as the nebula's tendrils struck the ship, red lightning crawling across the hull. Panels exploded, smoke filled the air. Lyra clung to the railing, shouting, "It's breaching the shields." Rylan gripped the lever, his muscles tense. The ship's computer screamed warnings. Core temperature critical, containment failing. He ignored them. Lyra stumbled toward him, grabbing his arm. You'll die, and it won't stop. You said humans don't quit. Prove it by surviving. Rylan looked at her with a faint smile. Survival isn't always victory. Sometimes it's just delay. He turned to the viewport, where the storm's vast face formed again, light swirling into eyes that spanned miles. Human heart, it whispered. You burn too brightly. You will destroy what you wish to protect. Rylan's voice cut through the noise. Maybe, but better to die on my feet than fade in your shadow. He pulled the lever. The ship screamed. The engines roared. The reactor ignited with blinding blue light. The entire vessel shook as if caught between worlds. Lyra covered her face, shouting his name. Rylan. Energy surged through the Valkyrie, racing through every circuit, every bolt, every piece of metal. The Nebula howled, a sound that wasn't sound, but emotion, rage, fear, awe. Its tendrils wrapped tighter, trying to choke the light from the ship. But the reactor's pulse kept rising, brighter, louder, unstoppable. Rylan's voice echoed through the intercom, calm amid chaos. Lyra, when this ship hits overload, you'll have 3 seconds to eject the core into the Nebula's heart. It'll implode, not explode, pulling the storm inward. Lyra shook her head, tears streaming. You'll be caught in it. Someone has to guide it, he said softly. The core won't aim itself. She stared at him, broken. Why you? He smiled faintly. Because humans do crazy things for people they just met. Lyra's lips trembled. That's not madness, that's love. He didn't answer, but the faint warmth in his eyes said everything. He stepped into the reactor chamber, the door sealing behind him. Inside, the light was unbearable, pure energy flowing through transparent conduits. He placed his hand on the containment ring, the metal burning his skin instantly. Every nerve screamed, but he didn't move. Come on, he whispered, one last flight. Outside, the Nebula loomed, its face twisting, its voice trembling. You would give your flame to the void, it murmured. Why? Rylan looked into the glow, whispering back. Because that's what makes us human. Lyra's hands flew over the console, her heart pounding. Core in position. The system warned, eject ready. Rylan's voice came through faintly, static breaking it apart. Now, Lyra, do it now. She hit the command, sobbing. The core detached, a sphere of burning light shooting from the ship into the storm. The Nebula screamed, light folding, twisting, collapsing inward. Its enormous form turned to dust and flame, a dying god devoured by its own creation. Rylan's voice whispered through the calm one last time, faint but clear. Tell her, the stars will remember. Then silence. The storm vanished, leaving only darkness and a single glimmer of blue. Lyra stood frozen, tears glowing like stars on her cheeks. She fell to her knees, whispering, he's gone. The ship floated among the quiet stars. No storm, no light, only peace. The heart of Elair lay beside Ceres, faintly pulsing again, but different now, softer, gentler. Lyra touched it with trembling hands. The heart shimmered, and a voice echoed faintly from within, warm and familiar. Don't cry, princess. Humans don't vanish. They just become part of the light. Lyra's tears turned to a smile. She looked at the fading glow outside and whispered, goodbye, Captain Rylan Hayes, your fire will never fade. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, a single spark ignited inside the quiet dark. A spark that refused to die. A spark called humanity. The silence after the storm felt endless. Space stretched wide and empty, the stars blinking faintly like distant tears. Where the crimson nebula once burned, only a soft golden shimmer now remained. The gods of the storm were gone, and so was the man who faced them. Inside the Valkyrie, what was left of it drifted slowly, wounded but alive. Princess Lyra Varellin stood at the cracked viewport, her reflection pale in the fading light. Behind her, Ceres still slept in the med chamber, her breathing weak but steady. The heart of Elair hovered beside her, glowing soft blue like a sleeping child. For the first time, the heart's light no longer burned. It pulsed gently, almost human. Lyra placed her hand on the glass, whispering, he did it. Her voice trembled. He gave everything, and he won. She remembered Ryland's last words, the warmth in his eyes. Humans don't vanish, they just become part of the light. She closed her eyes, and in that silence, she almost heard his heartbeat echo through the ship. Hours turned into days. The ship's autopilot engaged, following the faint beacon of a nearby Varellan outpost. Lyra repaired what she could, guided only by Ryland's recorded voice in the logs. He had left messages hidden in the system, fragments of his humor and courage. "Remember, Princess," his voice said in one log. "Flying is just falling in style, with purpose." Lyra smiled through her tears. "Even in death, you still teach." When the Varellan fleet finally found the Valkyrie, it was half-burned, adrift in silence. The rescue team boarded carefully, weapons raised, but lowered them in awe. They found 2 princesses alive, and a ship that had no right to exist after such a storm. Word spread through the Empire like wildfire. The human had defied the Nebula and lived long enough to save royal blood. At the great citadel of Varela, the Empress herself stood to honor the fallen pilot. Thousands gathered under the crystal domes, the sky above filled with projections of stars. Lyra stood at the center, the heart of Velair resting in her hands, glowing bright and pure. She spoke softly, her voice carrying through the chamber. He was not of our kind, yet he carried the courage of 1,000 warriors. Her eyes glistened. He entered the storm alone, not for empire, not for glory, but because it was right. The heart pulsed once, and the light within it shimmered into a holographic image. Ryland's face appeared, calm, brave, alive within the glow. Gasps spread through the hall. Lyra stepped closer, whispering, "Captain Hayes." The projection smiled faintly. "I guess this means I made it to the fancy ceremony." Laughter mixed with tears across the hall. The recording continued. "If you're seeing this, it means the heart is safe, and the nebula is gone. But listen, don't forget what it taught us." He paused, eyes bright. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what must be done despite it. And that's what makes humans impossible to break." The message ended, the light fading, leaving behind quiet sobs and reverent silence. Lyra held the heart tightly, tears falling freely now. Saris, standing beside her, whispered, "He's part of it now, isn't he?" Lyra nodded, her voice soft. "Yes, he became the light within the heart." That night, the Varellan skies shimmered as the twin moons rose. The Empire declared a new constellation in the heavens. 7 bright stars forming the outline of a winged ship, the Valkyrie. At its center burned one golden spark, brighter than the rest. They named it the Human Star. Centuries would pass. The legend of Captain Ryland Hayes would become myth. Songs would be sung of the man who challenged a living god, of the human who taught an empire that heart could conquer power. But in the archives of Varela, a secret was kept. A recording buried within the heart of Velair, sealed by Lyra herself. It played only once, under the quiet hum of the stars. Ryland's voice, faint but alive, whispering, "If anyone ever finds this, tell them. Humans were never the strongest, never the fastest, never the most powerful." A pause, warm and certain. But we were the ones who cared enough to try. The stars outside shimmered brighter, as if answering his words. Lyra looked toward them, her lips forming a gentle smile. "Then we'll keep trying, Captain," she whispered, "for as long as the light remembers." And far beyond the galaxies, where the remnants of the crimson nebula slept, a faint pulse of blue light flickered once. Soft, steady, human. The universe listened, and somewhere in its endless heart, a whisper echoed, "Humans don't vanish, they become part of the fire,